You set up a $200 automatic transfer on a Tuesday afternoon. You didn't think much of it. You were eating lunch. That was the moment everything changed. You just didn't know it yet. There's a mechanism hidden inside the financial system that most people interact with their entire lives without ever understanding what it's actually doing to them, not to their account balance, to their life, to their proximity to power, to what their grandchildren will inherit before they're even born. Compound interest is the most taught concept in personal finance. It is also the least understood, because everyone learns what it is, almost no one learns what it becomes. This is what it does at every level. Level 1. The savings account earns 4.85% APY. You set up the automatic transfer, $200 a month, and you mostly forget about it. That's intentional. The automation is the strategy. The forgetting is the point. In month 1, you earn $4.03 in interest. You don't notice. In month 6, the balance is $1,242, still invisible. By the end of year 2, you have $5,180 in the account, and you've earned $181 in interest you did nothing to generate. $181. You could have bought groceries with that. You didn't have to. That's the first thing compound interest does. It creates a second income that requires no labor. At this level, that income is quiet, almost imperceptible, a whisper in a language you don't speak yet. But the mechanism is on, and once it's on, it doesn't turn off. The psychological shift at level 1 isn't about money. It's about identity. You stopped being someone who spends what arrives. You became someone who keeps part of what arrives. That distinction, invisible to everyone around you, is the first door. Most people never walk through it. Level 2. The first index fund purchase is almost always anticlimactic. You transfer $1,000 into a brokerage account. You buy VOO or VTI or something that tracks the S&P 500. The expense ratio is 0.03%. That number matters more than you think, but we'll get to that. You place the order, you wait. The next day, the market drops 2.3%. Your $1,000 is now $977. This is the test, not a metaphorical test, an actual psychological filter that separates the people who build wealth from the people who don't. Most people sell. They call it cutting losses. It feels logical. It is not. You hold. The S&P 500 has returned an average of 10.7% annually since 1957. That number contains crashes, recessions, financial crises, pandemics, and wars. It contains every moment of mass panic in modern economic history, and still 10.7% annually over time. The market dropped 34% in 23 days in March 2020. It recovered in 148 days. The people who held made their money back and then more. The people who sold locked in a loss on paper and turned it into a real one. When dividends start arriving, quarterly deposits of $11, then $23, then $40, you enable DRIP, dividend reinvestment. Each dividend buys fractional shares. Those shares generate future dividends, which buy more shares. The machine is learning to feed itself. And you start to understand something quietly, without anyone telling you. You are no longer just a worker. You are also an owner of small pieces of hundreds of companies simultaneously. They are working right now, while you sleep, while you're on vacation, while you're doing something that has nothing to do with money. That realization lands differently for different people. For some, it takes years. For others, it hits all at once like a window opening. Either way, level 2 ends the same way. You don't look at your portfolio every day anymore. You understand why that's an advantage. Level 3. Optimization begins. The Roth IRA is maxed, $7,000 in 2024. The contribution goes in on January 2nd every year, not because timing the market works, but because time in the market works, and every day uninvested is a day the machine isn't running. The 401k captures the full employer match. If your employer matches 4%, you contribute at least 4%. Anything less is leaving part of your salary on the table, not metaphorically, literally. The match is compensation. Uncaptured compensation is a pay cut you gave yourself. You start reading fund prospectuses. You understand expense ratios now. The difference between a 0.03% expense ratio and a 1.2% expense ratio on a $200,000 portfolio over 30 years is approximately $330,000. That number is not a typo. That is the cost of not reading a single number on a single page. Net worth gets tracked, not obsessed over tracked. There's a spreadsheet or an app or a note somewhere. Assets minus liabilities equals net worth. You update it quarterly. The number grows in ways that feel nonlinear because they are nonlinear. That's compound growth. The curve is gentle at first and then it isn't. At level 3, something changes in how you think about purchases. Not in a deprivation way, in a translation way. A $600 purchase isn't $600 anymore. It's $600 that won't compound for 30 years. At 10%, that's $10,472 in future value. You don't become paralyzed by that math, but you're aware of it. The awareness changes behavior at the margin. Small adjustments, repeated over time, that's the formula. It's not exciting, it works anyway. Level 4. The portfolio crosses $400,000 and something unexpected happens. A 10% market correction, which is normal, which happens roughly once every 16 months historically, is now a $40,000 drop on paper. You watch your net worth fall by an amount that would have taken you years to save in your early 20s, in a single week. This is the emotional stress test that level 2 only previewed. At $1,000, a 10% drop is $100, uncomfortable. At $400,000, a 10% drop is $40,000. That number has weight, it presses on the chest. You buy anyway, quietly, automatically, because you understand now that corrections are not catastrophes, they're discounts. The people who are afraid to invest during a correction are paying full price while you pay less. That's the arbitrage hiding inside fear. The infrastructure at level 4 goes beyond the portfolio. Emergency fund, 6 months of expenses in a high-yield account, untouched, not counted in the investment math. A will, a beneficiary update on every account, a term life policy if there are dependents, an umbrella policy on top of the car and home insurance. None of this is exciting to talk about. All of it matters enormously. At $400,000 net worth, you are in the top 25% of American households by wealth. That sounds significant, and it is. But it's also the level right before the geometry of wealth starts to visibly change. The next door is heavier than the others. Level 5. The accredited investor threshold is $1 million in investable assets or $200,000 in annual income. You cross it. And the game board changes. For the first time, you have access to investment products that do not appear in any mainstream financial media, private equity funds, private credit, real estate syndications, venture capital. These are not better or worse by definition. They are different, and they operate by different rules. Private equity historically returns 14–16% net IRR annually over long holding periods, compared to the S&P's 10.7%. But the minimum investment is often $250,000, and your capital is locked for 7 to 10 years. Illiquidity is the price of the premium. Most people cannot pay that price. You can. Private credit lending directly to companies rather than buying their public stock yields 10–14% currently. These instruments don't exist on any exchange. They're not in your brokerage app. They require legal documentation, fund minimums, and relationships your previous net worth could not access. Here is what level 5 actually means. It's not just that you have more money. It's that you now exist in a different information environment. The deals available to you are invisible to 95% of investors, not because they're secret, because access is denominated in capital. And the compound interest happening inside a private equity fund on a portfolio of operating companies across 7 years, that doesn't look like a bar chart in a brokerage app. It looks like a quarterly report and a wire transfer. The mechanism is the same. The setting is different. Level 6. $4 million. The tax conversation changes completely. At a W-2 income of $500,000, the marginal federal rate approaches 37%. At $4 million in invested assets generating long-term capital gains, the effective federal tax rate can be 20% or less. Add qualified opportunity zones, tax loss harvesting, charitable remainder trusts, donor-advised funds, and that number can legally fall to single digits. This is not tax evasion. This is the tax code as written. The instruments are legal. The accountants who structure this are not doing anything illegal. They are doing what the code permits. The people who wrote the code knew it permitted this. 529 college savings plans get seeded at birth, sometimes before birth, sometimes for children not yet conceived. A $75,000 lump sum 529 contribution at birth, growing at 7% annually for 18 years, becomes approximately $252,000, tax-free for education. The child didn't ask for it. They will benefit from a decision made before their first memory. This is where compound interest begins to reach across time in a way that feels qualitatively different. You are building for people who are not yet alive. The mechanism doesn't care. It runs anyway. Family office structures start to make economic sense at this level, a dedicated entity managing the financial affairs of a single family. The minimum viable family office requires roughly $5,100 million to justify the overhead, but at $4 you begin to interact with multifamily offices offering similar services. Your accountant, your attorney, your financial advisor, and your estate planner start to coordinate. You are no longer managing money. You are managing a system. Level 7. $40 million. Board seats arrive, not because you sought them, because capital of this magnitude attracts them. Nonprofits, private companies, advisory roles, the invitations come. Proximity to power becomes a function of net worth, not a reward for virtue or intelligence or effort, though all of those may have contributed. Simply, a function of capital. The people making decisions about cities, industries, and institutions are disproportionately people in this range, not because wealth qualifies anyone to make those decisions, because wealth creates the proximity that makes those conversations possible. Compound interest at $40 million generates, at a conservative 5% return, $2 million annually. That number is not income in the traditional sense, it's output. The portfolio produces $2 million per year the way a factory produces goods, continuously, without requiring presence. The S&P 500's long-term 10.7% return on $40 million is $4.28 million per year, every year, without selling anything, the principal intact, the machine growing larger. Here is what Level 7 reveals that Level 1 obscured entirely. Compound interest is not just a wealth-building tool. At scale, it becomes a mechanism of stratification. The gap between a $40 million portfolio and a $40,000 portfolio does not stay constant. It widens, every year, automatically, without anyone deciding to make it wider. The mechanism has no opinion about this. It simply runs. Level 8. There is no single dramatic moment at this level. The structures were built quietly, over years, by attorneys and advisors whose job is to make the transition invisible. Dynasty trusts in South Dakota or Nevada, jurisdictions with no rule against perpetuities, hold assets that will not be distributed for 100 years. The trust doesn't die when you do. It continues, compounding. A foundation structured as a 501c3 holds hundreds of millions. It is required to distribute only 5% annually. The remaining 95% continues to grow. Invested in a diversified endowment-style portfolio, earning 7-9% annually, the foundation grows even as it gives. The name on the building may be yours. The decisions will eventually be made by people who never met you. Holding companies consolidate assets across real estate, operating businesses, and investment portfolios. The architecture is invisible from the outside. From the inside, it looks like an org chart and a monthly financial statement. The name on the trust is not your name. It is a name chosen for legal purposes, for privacy, for continuity. The assets inside the trust do not know who owns them. They grow regardless. The machine no longer needs you. It never really did. You were the ignition, not the engine. And then there's a 23-year-old in a city you'll never visit. He opens a brokerage account on a Sunday night. He links his checking account. He sets up a $200 monthly transfer. He picks a broad market index fund with a 0.03% expense ratio. He reads the confirmation email, closes the app, and goes to bed. He thinks this is about security, about having a cushion, about not being broke at 40. He doesn't know about the dynasty trust. He doesn't know about the private equity fund, or the family office, or the board seat, or the foundation with the name that isn't anyone's name anymore. He doesn't know that the $200 he just committed is the same mechanism, the exact same mathematical engine that runs at every level above him, scaled differently, dressed differently, but identical in principle. He thinks he's being responsible. He doesn't know yet that he just turned something on. And that the question, the only question that ever mattered, was never whether to start. It was only how long ago. The mechanism doesn't wait for understanding, it just runs.